Let's talk about Xcode and how you can set up your project really simple and edit the settings afterwards if you've actually, made some choices in the beginning which you're not really happy with or just have changed along the way. My name's Sander and this is open source, and let's check out your Xcode project. So what am I going to talk about in today's video? Well, today I'll be discussing what the difference between an Xcode project versus an Xcode workspace is. I'll be talking to you about how you can change some specific settings in your Xcode project after you've created the project. So let's say you chose the wrong development team or you've reconsidered on what your application should be named. We'll talk about that. We'll talk about how you can change the iOS development version. So maybe you want to support more than the latest iOS version. We'll talk about how to do that. And we'll just cover some basic settings that might be necessary for your application. Come on, let's go check it out.
All right, let's talk about the initial Xcode settings and what some of those results might produce. So I'll start off by opening Xcode again, and I'll create a dummy project for us to explore some of these settings. So I clicked on create a new project, and now we're greeted with this screen. This has quite a few options for us. This has the single view application we chose in our main tutorial video. This has a game version, so if you actually wanted to create a game, so this has some sort of game engine built in it, and it has the Metal APIs and everything in there. Then you could choose this one. Augmented reality apps. So what these actually give you is like a base project. So example, if we choose this one right now, we're going to get like a master detail app. What this means is iOS has this view where you can have a detail and a master basically. So let's see what that is. Actually, no, let's grab the tabbed app. This is a simpler explanation because the other one is a very edge case nowadays. It's more apparent on iPads or large phones, but yeah, you don't see it used very often. So let's just create a temp app, and we're gonna come back to the screen later and talk about a bit more about this. And I'll create it in a temp folder. Did not need a Git repository, but yeah, we got it anyways. So this is just the example project. So last time we used a single view app. This time we chose the tabbed app. And if we actually look at the main storyboard, we could probably see a difference here. So we'll see that there's a tab controller already given to us. There's a first view, there's a second view, everything is added by default. And that's basically the only difference that happens when you choose like a different starting point. So you get more stuff originally given to you. But if you're going to be building an app from scratch, I do believe, at least personally, that it is more beneficial to just choose the single view app because you get more control and you get to build everything the way you want. And you just basically, what I would do was I would delete this anyways, and I would start from scratch. I would build it the way I want. So this for me creates extra bloat, but for you it might be the way to go. So that's the way you can do that. And if I just launch this app by running it, Command R or click on the play button, then we can just see that, yeah, it does, show us the tab bar controller here. Once it finishes launching right now, it's still loading up the application. So the first launch can take time. So yeah, we can see that this is the first view. This is on the first tab, like here right now. Click on the second one, we see it on the second tab. And yeah, this is like just the original loadout. But there are some other options there as well. So if we go back and create a new project, we can see that not only is there application selections here, there are frameworks and libraries as well. So sometimes you want to create frameworks. So in the main tutorial section, we did explore a framework, which was PinKit. We just imported it with Swift Package Manager. So if you wanted to create a framework like that, then you would choose this option. Or maybe you want another type like Metal library doing something for games or working with the Metal API, then that's the one you would choose. But other than that, single view application is the default go-to app that you want to create. Okay, but I said that we're going to explore this page as well. So product name, that's generally going to be your application name. You might have some edge case where it's not, but we're not going to talk about those because, like I said, those are edge cases, and I can't really think of one where I would not have the product name as my app name. Maybe it's a white label application, then yeah, the app name will be something else. This will be like the basis of it. The team, this one is a bit like, of course, product name is an important setting as well, but team is really important and plays a big role. And what does this team actually do? Well, the team is the signing entity for your application. So meaning if you want to actually deploy your app to the App Store or on an actual device, then this app needs to be signed in order for iOS to run it. And why is this important? Well, personal teams really don't have the ability to sign apps for like a longer time usage. For that, you would need a developer account from apple.developer. Then you can do it for longer. But you can use the personal account to get like, I'm not even sure right now if it's like 24 hours, but you can get like a short-term launch on your app. So if you're just testing or playing around with stuff, you don't need to buy the developer account for a year. You don't need that if you're just doing stuff on your own. But if you do want to send the app for testers or some other people running it, then you do need a developer account. And that it's quite common that you don't initially have a developer account, that if you're building your first app especially. But if you do get one later, then you don't need to start a new project. You can change those settings, and I'll show you later in this video where you can change those settings and how you could handle code signing then. Okay, so what is the next thing? The organization name. It's mostly who is creating this app. This information can be listed in iOS later on. And then the organization identifier is generally just used for identification purposes. If you don't have like a domain, then just com.example would suffice for now. But really, when you're launching your application, Apple does expect you to have like expect you to have a few websites in place to support your application. So they will want a contact website, and like maybe they do expect you to have privacy policy links. So you're probably going to want to have a domain name when you're actually launching the application. But again, you can change all these settings. For now, if you don't have them, don't worry about that. Just add like com.example and your app. So this will be a example app. And this will be fine. You can change literally all of these settings later. Language, this is very self-explanatory. This is just Swift. We're not touching Objective-C on this channel, I think. Maybe if there is a large demand for it, but other than that, I don't think I'll ever touch upon it. There's plenty of other resources for that, and I don't see the need to cover that. Now, the user interfaces, like I said in the main tutorial, that we were going with a third approach. Swift UI is Apple's new way of doing things, but since it's only supported by the latest iOS version, it does limit you to what you can do with it. And it's not really ready for real life usage. What I mean by that is that, yeah, you can use it, definitely. And it is ready in that sense that you can use it, you can deploy your app to the App Store, but it's going to give you some headaches because the tooling around it is not where tooling around normal ways, so programmatical approaches are. And you just get a lot more headaches. There's less support because less people use it on a daily basis. Everything around that is kind of raw. Storyboards are quite commonly used everywhere. I've come across quite a few apps or people use it in their day. This is just something I don't like using. That does not mean you shouldn't use it if you like it. But however, storyboards do come with a few downsides. Everything does. Programmatic approach also comes with the downside of you can't just look at something. You have to actually run it if you want to see the view appear. But storyboards are great for that because you can just draw stuff up in the IDE and it will basically look the same on the actual application. But the downsides are that first, it's going to have some issues in code reviews. And secondly, the other issue would be that you don't have such a granular level of control when you're using storyboards. So sometimes, even if you are using storyboards, you will need to actually, create stuff in code or make sibs in smaller parts. And, the benefit is lost then. Okay, so what are these three selections here? So core data is just a database engine built on SQLite, and it's really good. It's really efficient. By all means, if you need something like this, go ahead and use this approach. An alternative way a lot of people use is Realm. Realm is also pretty good. I don't know which one I prefer. I've used Realm a lot. I've used less of core data, but personally, if I were to build an app, I'd probably look into core data because I don't like using third-party libraries in general. I try to avoid using them. There are some you can't get away with. So if you're using like a third-party service, then it might be very useful for you to use them. But other than that, no. So core data is really good, and CloudKit is a way to store stuff in the iCloud. And again, a lot of apps do use it, and it's really useful, and it is something that you should check out probably. Okay, another thing that you can immediately add to your project are unit tests and UI tests. So what's the difference between a unit test and UI test? Well, UI tests are great for testing integration with other services, so that you will actually run the app. You will go through your flows. So you can use UI tests to test flows, integration with other services, so on, and that's really great. And unit tests you would use to actually test your own code and make sure that it works the way you're expecting it to do. And it's really good to implement both in apps. It does cover a lot of ground, and it does provide good tooling for it out of the box. And if you enable these, then your project will be populated with the initial stuff that you need to run these. So let's click next now. All right, here on the screen we actually see a new bar here. If we initially created a project, we didn't have this one. This means that we can actually add it to another workspace. What are workspaces versus code projects? Well, code projects are, they're this one target. They're just focused on one project at the same time, while workspaces may contain multiple projects, and these multiple projects can build into different things. So larger applications such as like a Facebook app or something like that might split their code base into multiple smaller parts, where they will have one part of their code in one project, another one in another, and all these smaller projects combine into the large app, which we see on the App Store today, which is like their Facebook app. And another way would be to, if you want to control some libraries or something like that in your application, then and have everything in one repository or one big project, then that's the way you would probably go about that. And if we do press create now, then we will see that, hey, this is the temp project, and the example app is now inside of this temp one as well. And if we wrap this up, we do actually see the temp app, we see the example app in here, and they are actually like two different ones. So we can now run the example app. And now that the example app is running, we can switch between them, see that the temp app is still the first view one. And yeah, they're two different ones. They're in one side and one big project, and this would be the workspace. Another thing I was talking about earlier was changing settings later, and that you shouldn't worry about these settings initially. So let's cover a few things we might want to change later. So one common thing Well, actually, this is not so common because apps rarely change names. But initially, when you're coming out with a product, it might be that you do want to change the name or the identity of it later or during the development process. So yeah, here we can just change the name to, I don't know, another app. And yeah, this would actually change the name. So if we run this now, we can see that the app name on iOS screen does change to another app, or if we move it here, so yeah, we can see it in the app switcher, it's also another app or temp app. So yeah, that would change it. So if we wanted to change the bundle identifier now, back to the one I usually use is IORogue, because that's my domain name. That would be the way I would do that. And versions and build numbers are very common to be changed. Usually people automate these things with CI scripts, but some of the stuff you might want to keep manual. It really depends on how you want to accomplish your things and the way you want to run your projects. So another common setting to change is the iOS development deployment version. And right now this would be selected on 13.2, meaning that only people who run iOS 13.2 can access this application. But maybe we don't want to limit to that. We just want to, use iOS 11, or even with 13. Some people, maybe they did update to iOS 13, but they didn't actually update to any of the subversions. So we can, bump that version there, or move it to 11. So now we definitely made sure that basically everybody is able to use this. And this brings some more settings here. So iPhones and iPads. This is literally what it says. If you unselect this app no longer supports iPhones. If you unselect the iPad one, it can still be run on iPads. However, maybe you haven't seen it, but on iPads, it's like a smaller app. It gets like downscaled into this little one, and you can scale it up, you can scale it down. Yeah, this is how you would do that. Device orientations. Well, this does have a menu of supported ones, and usually you will see apps only have portrait mode, because it makes apps a lot easier to handle. And usually you don't want your Facebook or something rotating around, so they will just have portrait enabled. It is also important to check out your info plist for this support as well. Okay, so these are the core settings when on your app, but let's talk about signing as well. So earlier I said that you can change your development team later on as well, and this is what you would do from your targets signing and capabilities menu. And here you can have automatically managed signing. You can have and this is probably the best option for you if you're just starting off and you don't need custom settings. But down the line, if you want to customize it, you can turn it off. Then you can start adding your provisioning profiles here. So now my team actually got changed to Roco, or my company, because the provisioning profile I provided was this team's. But let's move it back, enable automatic, and now we can just add this team in, and that's how we've changed that. So some more settings you might want to customize are here under build settings, and it's a myriad of settings here. I'm just not going to cover them now, but one thing you might sometimes want to change is the Swift language version, and this can be changed for debug, release, and everything. And yeah, if you ever need to change that, then you can just do it from here, or you can just look it up, Swift language. And yeah, then you can just change these settings. Make sure you're doing this for all the targets you need, and so on. But because there's a lot of settings you can change here for different reasons, I will not cover them all, and you will have to look up those settings yourself. Build phases we touched upon a little bit in our previous video. Here you would have your custom scripts running, like Swift linters, Swift formatters, Carthage, so on. That's where you would put this. Build rules. you basically don't need to touch unless there's like a specific reason. Like so far I've never had to touch these settings because I really have not had the reason to do so. And yeah, this basically covers the core settings here. So we talked about changing a lot of different settings for an app, but one thing we didn't talk about is how you would create a different build schema for your development code and your production code differently. So you could have the single code base, but sometimes you want to switch out parts of your code depending if you're developing right now or if you're actually in the production code. So right now we're going to talk about that. And in order to keep it more simple, because we did nest our other example project in another workspace, I'm just going to create a new single view app just so everything would be a little simpler and easier to follow. So this will be an example app again. So we wouldn't have any conflicts. Great. Okay, so in order to add a new configuration, we're going to keep this one for our production code, but we're going to add a new one for our development code. So first I'll choose the example project here, not the build target, but the project itself. I'll head over to editor, add configuration, and I'll add a debug one because really we don't need another release one. We do want the debuggers in this code, and this is the development configuration. Cool. So now we've done this, we are going to want to configure it to be another app on our device. So let's head over to build settings and actually choose the target. So we'll now look for the bundle identifier. And here we have to click on it and make sure you open this drop down. And now we're just going to change it for the development version, and I'll add a dev in the end. So what this does, it makes sure that we have two applications on our device instead of one. Another thing I am going to do is I will name the app something different here as well. So if you don't know how to look for stuff, maybe look for the string actually, but under packaging, you should find the product name. And we'll expand this as well. Development name is target name. Okay, so now that we've been renamed and changed the bundle identifier, let's actually make it so that we can launch our app, because right now if we did launch our app, we can see that it was the example app. So if we bring out the app switcher, it's the example app, but we want to launch the dev version. So in order to do that, we'll head over to the schemes, hit new scheme, and we'll call this the dev scheme. And now let's go to manage schemes. We want the dev scheme, and actually we just want to edit the scheme. So edit scheme and go info. And here we can see that we're currently using the build configuration for debug, but we're interested in the development one. Close this. Now, if we run this, we get a new app. And if we look at it, we still have the example app there. And we have the example app here. But we see two different apps, and the reason they're differently or the same name is because the product name itself is not updated. It's the wrong one. Make sure you don't rename the module name, but you actually rename the product name. Hit run, and now you should see that we should have two apps. One is example app, the other is example app dev, as we can see here over on the homepage. And the app switcher can be a little finicky. It might not update immediately, but now we can see that it did update. Okay, so that's how you would change the name. But let's say we do actually want to, launch some code that is dependent on the scheme itself as well. Okay, so to make sure that we have the ability to launch different code or execute different code in our development configuration and our live configuration, we'll do the following. So first we'll head over to build settings again for our target, and we will look for other Swift flags. Cool. And here we want to make sure that we'll add debug one. Actually, no, right now, because we're interested in just differentiating between our development version, we will add a development flag, and this will be D for flag, and this will be dev. Dev is D just stands for the flag. Okay, and that's how you would do it. So now we have a flag which we can look for in our code. So let's make sure we actually use this code. So let's over to our view controller. That's a code we already know that is going to be loaded. And we're going to be adding some lines of code to make sure that everything gets printed. So let's just start with a string variable. And this will be our printed production string. And we'll just print the string. And now we run it. Both the dev and production schemes will execute the same code. So right now we're executing it on dev. Let's see if our production actually executes the same thing. It does. So, okay, how do we make sure that this actually is a development string or a production string? Okay, let's explain this. So differentiating between these lines of code is going to be very simple. We have to do if dev, then we're going to execute our dev code. So, and here we will do else. We will do let string. And so making sure, adding another string. So adding another string that would be our string for the development version would be very easy. So for that, we would add a if statement for the compiler. And we do this by doing if dev, because our flag was named dev, and we'll add it here. It'll be let string equals our printed development string. So else will be our production string. And we need to end this if statement. Now we should have a development string and our production string. Let's see, we're building the production app right now, running it, and our printed production string. Let's launch the dev scheme. Our printed development string. And this is how easy it is to differentiate your code for development and your production code. So let's say you would have an API link right there or something else, then that's how you would do it.
Hopefully this video has been of use to you in understanding how Xcode works and what the settings actually do. If that's the case, leave a like and leave a comment down below. But anyways, my name has been Sander, and I'll see you in the next episode.